You guys just tell us when you're ready to go. Good to meet you, mate. I've seen you on the telly.
I think we met, Lloyd. Yeah, nice to meet you. Oh, great to meet you. Not as much as you.
Film straight into the sun. Good. How are you, buddy? Good to see you.
How are you?
Good, mate. Good.
I'm happy. We're happy. We're happy.
All right. Well, listen, can I just say firstly, thank you so much for coming out here this afternoon. We're in a very unusual situation in New Zealand. We have a town at the moment that is actually shut down, and it's not shut down because of a natural disaster. It's shut down because the mongrel mob have come to town, and now we're in a position where our schools are closed, bus services aren't running, and 2 houses have been firebombed. And the Prime Minister this morning says it's actually not his job. Well, I have to say, Prime Minister, it is your job to actually make sure that New Zealanders feel safe in their own homes, their own businesses, their own community, and it is your job to make sure you're not sending a message that you're soft on crime. The National Party has a plan under a government that I lead. It's pretty simple. We're going to give police and back police to have powers to tackle gangs. That means banning gang patches in public places, giving them dispersal notices to break up intimidation like we're seeing in Opotiki, make sure that we can actually break up criminal activity, and finally chase illegal guns by giving them warrantless search powers. That's seriously how we back our police, we tackle our gangs, we have serious consequences for serious young offenders. That's how we get New Zealand back on track. And with that, happy to take your questions.
Mr. Luxon,
Yes, sir.
how are you?
How am I?
Yeah, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. Very good, thank you.
Look, given what you've said that you want to give police powers to disperse gatherings, how do you reconcile the fact that this may breach the freedom of association that's assured by the Bill of Rights Act?
I don't care. Gangs are not people who want to deal with the normal reality of New Zealand. Every New Zealander has a right and a responsibility, a right to be a Kiwi, but also responsibilities to each other and to the country. Gangs are not nice people. They are not doing that. They want the rights but not the responsibilities. And I don't think it's fair that actually, everyday Kiwis sitting on Opotiki trying to get the kids to school, trying to catch a bus, trying to go about their business, actually are feeling intimidated and scared. That's utterly unacceptable. And that's what's happened under this government. We've got a government that's soft on crime, and we have seen it over the last 2 years in particular, where we just start to accept that this is the normal. Well, I don't accept that this is the normal activity in New Zealand. I don't accept this level of crime is anywhere near acceptable. It has to improve.
Mr. Luxon, this situation with more police resources have already been sent to the town. What could realistically be done now?
Well, we want the police to have the powers to actually break up gangs and disperse them from intimidating behaviour in public places. That would be a great power for police to have. We want the police to be able to have warrantless search powers to go after illegal guns that may be in gang cars, gang pads, wherever they are. That's driving our violent crime. So we've got to back our police and give them more powers. It is utterly unacceptable. A town is shut down in New Zealand because a gang came to town. Unacceptable.
How far realistically
I think we are not even, this government has been soft on gangs and soft on crime. You've seen it. They gave $3 million to the mongrel mob for drug rehabilitation. Gangs got $9,000 last week for filling in census forms, for goodness sake. We have rights and responsibilities to each other, and this is unacceptable. And New Zealanders have a basic responsibility, a right to feel safe in their own home, in their own business, in their own community.
So, Mr. Luxon, you mentioned the banning of gang patches. What if members of a gang may be gathering without their patches?
That's fine. What we don't want, and we announced this policy last year, is we think that gang patches are intimidating. They've been banned in government buildings. We're going to ban them in public places. We are going to give police the powers to disperse gangs when they have got intimidating behaviour in public places. That's what we're seeing in Opotiki today.
So gathering without wearing any colours or patches, there's no problem?
We're going to ban gang patches in public places is what we've seen. So that's the police powers that we want to have.
Opotiki Mayor David Moore this morning tonight, the town is being held to ransom by gang members. Is this fear-mongering?
No, it's not. When you have a schools closed, that is utterly unacceptable. That is scaremongering. That is a town that is incredibly scared. When you can't send your kids to school and the school closes, that's a basic. That hasn't happened in New Zealand before. When you actually have to suspend public transport and bus services in the town, that's not happened in New Zealand before. When you have two, mysterious firebombing of houses, that's not normal behaviour. So the residents of Opotiki will be feeling incredibly frightened, and they don't deserve to feel scared in their own town, in their own home, in their own businesses. And it's all because we've got a government that's soft on crime and a Prime Minister that says it's actually not actually his job. Well, Prime Minister, it is your job.
Carrying on from that, what did you say no to some, like
We've had a policy about saying we're going to back our police, tackle gangs, and have serious consequences for serious young offenders for some time. You know, over the last year, we've talked about this issue. But we are living in a country at the moment where this government has one single goal in the justice space. It is a 30% reduction in the prison population. That would be perfectly fine if we had a 30% reduction in crime. But, you know, violent crime is up 30%, retail crime's up 40%, gang membership's up 65%, and a ram raid happens every 15 hours, and now we shut down a town because a gang came to town. Unacceptable. Well, we want all leaders on the ground, local community leaders stepping in and trying to resolve the situation quickly. But the bigger issue here is it shouldn't be happening. This is New Zealand. We don't tolerate this stuff. And if we start to accept that this is the new normal, what comes next? And so we have to be, we have to be tough on crime. And that's what, and this government hasn't been doing so.
Mr. Luxon, how would you respond to critics who say that actually the causes of those crime and rising gang membership need to be tackled?
Oh, I fully agree. We do need to work hard on the causes of crime as well, but it doesn't mean that we tolerate this and that good New Zealanders actually feel unsafe in their own homes and their own communities.
So what are the causes of this crime and gang membership, and how do you solve them?
Well, this is a different issue. This is about a gang coming to town and intimidating the local population such that they close schools, suspend public services like bus services because of the gang behaviour.
But I suppose that people would say that trying to disperse those gangs once they've already gathered is reactive and is an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff rather than trying to stop gangs.
Yeah, I'll let Paul answer that.
Well, look, I mean, what this government, Labor government, has achieved is the unique success of being both soft on crime and soft on the causes of crime as well. Because if you think about it, what's one of the drivers of long-term crime? It's kids not being at school. It's 4,000 kids being raised in motels and in emergency accommodation. It's failing to actually make progress on mental health, which they promised. So all of these long-term causes of crime, they have failed on as well. So national government will be dealing with those long-term issues, but we're also sending a very clear message around what isn't acceptable. And gangs taking over a town is not acceptable.
So does this apply only to gang patches, or does it include all of the tattoos?
No, we haven't included tattoos.
So this is just patches. So a gang could decide to just tattoo up and have a connotation.
We announced our policy last year and we're really clear about the fact we want to ban gang patches in public places. They're already banned in government buildings today. We're just extending that. Importantly, we want the police to have dispersal powers to be able to break up gangs in public places with intimidating behaviour, like we've seen in Opotiki, like we've seen in other towns across New Zealand at different times. We want gangs to be able to have powers to break up consorting and planning of criminal activity, and we need them to be able to have police to have powers to actually have warrantless search powers to crack down on the scourge of illegal guns, which is driving so much of our violent crime in New Zealand. But let's just take a step back and think about what we've seen as New Zealanders over the last few weeks. A road rage incident happens on State Highway 1 and it leads to a 15-year-old being shot. We have a beating take place at the bottom of Queen Street where all our international tourists arrive off our cruise ships in the middle of the day. We have a gang incident in Palmerston North with a skirmish that actually is outside a coffee shop in the middle of the day. We now have a gang coming to town that feels it can get away with it, and the consequences are that everybody else has to stop doing what they're doing and cancel school and suspend school, not catch buses, and actually deal with fear and intimidation in their town. That is utterly, utterly unacceptable. And so we have to have really serious consequences for serious offending. We have to tackle our gangs strongly, and we have to back our police and give them more tools to be able to cope with that. Let's do the 4 things we talked about, and let's start being tough on gangs and tackling the problem that we've got with gangs. Let's start there. We can intellectualise it, we can debate it, discuss it as much as you like, but at the moment we need action, and we need a government to pass those 4 actions would make a big difference in tackling gangs. That's right. Any other questions?
Just going back to your comments yesterday to farmers that New Zealand is quote negative, wet, whiny and inward looking. Is this how you feel about the country?
No, I think this is a country of endless potential. We have amazing people. We're in a really exciting part of the world. There is no reason why New Zealand cannot do well in the next 50 years. But let's be clear, we've had a government that has actually taken New Zealanders and New Zealand backwards. That's what I was talking about yesterday. And we're going to have a government, a national government that's going to have ambition and aspiration and positivity and optimism about our future. And we've got to get this country turned around, and we have to get it back on track. Our economy's going backwards. Our law and order situation's getting worse, as we're just talking about. We're seeing education, failed rates on academic achievement and attendance. We've got a healthcare system falling apart. And this government, for the last 6 years, is the reason for why New Zealand has gone backwards when the rest of the world's moving ahead. So I am a big patriotic Kiwi in New Zealand. I came back to this country. I've taken on this job and come to this job 2 years ago because that's how I feel, that we are not realising our potential. We are not solving our problems. We are not optimising the opportunities that we have, and we're not getting things done. And my government will be a turnaround government that gets New Zealand's mojo back and gets its positivity, ambition and aspiration back.
But as a politician hoping to lead New Zealand, are these comments
Well, if you listen to the full comments, that's exactly what I say. I am a big believer in New Zealand. It is a country of tremendous potential, but under this government we have not been realising that potential.
So
And
who are you speaking of?
this Labour government is blaming everybody else for its problems and not delivering for New Zealanders. It blames COVID for why we have a terrible set of economic mismanagement that's causing huge pain and suffering for New Zealanders. It blames everyone else but itself for actually causing the problems that we've got on education. Chris Hipkins was the education minister for 5.5 years. He spent $5 billion, hired 1,400 more bureaucrats, and got worse attendance and worse academic achievement. And yet he wants to blame lots of other people. Chris Hipkins was the education minister who put 16 polytechnics together, spent $200 million doing it, and now we have 10% less enrolments, 80% of the staff wanting to leave, and more financial pain coming. So this government blames everybody else rather than taking responsibility for its own actions that have caused pain and suffering and have caused New Zealand to go backwards. Look, it's not something that I've got involved in, to be honest. It's really about saying, we have a fantastic industry in agriculture. I think, again, the government has blamed farmers as part of their drive into identity politics, pitched farmers against, urban folk, treated them as villains, and actually farmers are deeply valued. It's a sector we should be incredibly proud about. And that's the message that I've got from farmers, is they feel beat up, they feel like they're treated as villains. It's not good enough. We should value farming. As I said yesterday, it generates 11% of our economy, 13% of our employment, 80% of our exports, and it certainly generates $10,000 for every man, woman and child in this country. And New Zealand will be poorer if we don't support agriculture as a result. So we can deliver on our climate change goals and climate emissions targets that we've committed to for 2050, and we can also strengthen and build our economy.
Just on the ag policy, some analysts have said that actually there was an emissions price for methane emissions, and that would basically only affect the most inefficient farmers when it comes to methane emissions. So wouldn't it be correct that those people may transition out farming into other more efficient farmers, take on more stock with more efficient?
Oh, look, it's very simple. We support a split gas approach to climate change. We think methane's very different from carbon, and we don't see a need for it to go into the ETS whatsoever. But what we say is that farmers want to reduce their emissions on farm, but you have to give them the tools and the technologies to be able to do that. You have to give them the ability to be able to sequester carbon and be able to track that, as well as obviously introduce agricultural emissions pricing at some future point, as we said, at the latest by 2030. But farmers need to be able to have the tools and the technologies to be able to respond to that and to manage their emissions down before you actually introduce pricing. Otherwise, it's just a tax on farmers. And as I said yesterday, here's the dilemma. We have the most emissions efficient farmers in the world. And at the same time, our farmers are the backbone of the New Zealand economy. And if you want to cull the herd and you want to shut down farming, all you're doing is moving that production that feeds 40 million people to a less emissions efficient country with a less emissions farm, and you don't improve global greenhouse gas emissions. And all you're doing, on the other hand, is just destroying livelihoods, weakening the New Zealand economy and making every single Kiwi in this country infinitely poorer. And so we're finding the balance and sequencing those things by saying, give farmers the tools and technologies they need to lower their emissions, make sure they get credit for good things they're doing on farm that are offsetting those emissions, and then yes, introduce agricultural pricing, as I said, before 2030.
But the gap between the most efficient country and the next most efficient country is not that big, is
We are amongst the most efficient farmers in the world, and we are not moving production out of New Zealand and making New Zealanders poorer by moving it to another country. And we're not improving global greenhouse gas emissions either by doing so. Right, last question.
Sorry, is predicting 50,000 more people entering the country. Do you think the government is prepared for that surge?
Well, that's a question you have to put to the government. It's important that any immigration is linked very strongly to our economic agenda of where we need workers and where we have worker shortages. We also need to make sure that we've got accompanying infrastructure to support that. What has been incredibly worrying is that we have 50,000 more New Zealanders on unemployment benefit under this government. 50,000 more people on unemployment when we actually have worker shortages and we have low unemployment. And so that's the best thing we could do, is get our people off welfare and into work and set up for a much better life and a better future. Then we need to make sure that we're bringing in immigrants that actually can add to our skills and add to New Zealand. And importantly, we've got to stop sending Kiwis overseas. And when Chris Hipkins takes $10,000 of taxpayer money and advertises to Kiwis living in Australia saying, congratulations, here's a pathway to Australian citizenship, proudly brought to you by the New Zealand government, it says to me he's not doing his job. You need to fight for New Zealand to make this the place of opportunity, that young people feel, I can start a business, I can raise a family, I can make a contribution in my community. Last question, yes, sorry. Oh, sorry, you go, sorry, shoot. Okay. Sorry, I didn't hear the question. I'm calling the Labour government wet and whiny. There's nothing wrong with New Zealand or New Zealanders. This is the best country on planet Earth, but we have endless potential. But this is a government taking us backwards on every single dimension that you can look at. And that's not unacceptable. And that's why I'm saying change is coming. You're going to get a positive, aspirational, ambitious, national-led government that's going to go out in the world and make sure that New Zealand has a great future in the next 50 years, which it can do and will do. But this government blames everybody else other than itself for its poor results and poor performance. So why are the schools closed in Opotiki if it's so calm? Why are the bus services closed? And why can't people get to and fro from their place of work? What we're saying to you is the government is soft on crime. Chris Hipkins not doing his job, which is to make sure New Zealanders feel safe in their homes, their businesses, their communities. And we cannot have a town shut down because a gang came to town. That is utterly unacceptable. Yes. What I feel is a real problem is that violent crime is up over 30% in New Zealand, and a big part of it is the scourge of illegal guns. And what we're going to do is crack down on illegal guns, and that means giving police warrantless search powers so that when they pull over a gang member in a car, they can search for their weapons that are illegal. Likewise, when they do an entry into a gang pad. Great. What can I? Sorry. What I'm talking about here is the government of New Zealand, the Labour government, that has been soft on crime and sent a message from the top that actually this is acceptable. You can get away with this. This is all fine, and it is not fine. It is unacceptable that hard-working New Zealanders trying to wake up this morning and go to work can't catch the bus to work, can't get their kids to school because gangs have come to town in New Zealand and shut it down. Unacceptable. All right, thanks so much, guys. Have a great day. Take care.
Thank you.
See ya.